He said, "You're kidding. You got it?"
They called us the Rust Belt. In the first month of the program, it's 2 days off and you go out of the city. Reason for that is to get your head away from your work.
But there was this tension within the articles between the city, the business community.
We kind of live in a cocoon.
I want to go where it's safe. I want to go where it's clean. I want to go where I got good health care. I want to go where I can get on a plane and go wherever I want in the world. And we have that quiet secret.
Welcome to the Leaders and Legends podcast. For those of you that have joined us in the past, you are familiar with this program. It's a combination between the Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce as well as the Venture Project, where we bring on different leaders in the Oshkosh community that will share different stories and history, as well as inspire different business owners and business leaders in the community. Today, we are fortunate enough to be joined by Mr. Jim Macy and Mr. Ed Williams, who have a rich history as attorneys at law in the Oshkosh area, as well as a rich history as leaders in various programs, and we're going to dig into some of those as well. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Macy and Mr. Ed.
Morning, right there.
Well, let's just start out with a little history lesson. Ed, would you like to just kind of share your background, where you came from, and what your story is?
Well, I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and had gone to school in La Crosse and had then gone to school in Kentucky, and then went to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And in Fort Lauderdale, I became involved in community matters as a young lawyer. And then what happened is I was there for 10 years, and my wife and I had a discussion. We had 2 children in school, and it was about time that they were getting to such an age that my wife said, "You know what? Our parents are getting older. Perhaps it's better to relocate to Wisconsin." And we did. But anyway, I had practiced in labor and employment law in Florida and in local governmental law, representing cities, counties, school districts, like I did in Wisconsin. And fast forward back to Wisconsin in the mid-'80s. When I came back to Wisconsin, I was involved in the chamber and was president of the chamber from 1988. And I'd seen, and as other people had seen, we'd discussed this. We had seen what was happening throughout the 70s and throughout the 80s, what was happening to local small businesses and even large businesses. In my hometown, G. Hylam & Brewing Company was bought out by an individual from Australia. And then the train company was... Excuse me.
Thought that was my phone at first.
This is
that my ringtone?
This is probably... Let me put this on mute. It's the first thing you're supposed
Please
to
silence your phone. No, it's okay.
But anyway, this no doubt is probably the fellow that went through the first class of leadership Oshkosh calling me about a tea time. This is the connections you make at Oshkosh. They are lifetime connections, believe me. So, but anyway, the discussions we had been about how small businesses were going by the wayside, how the large businesses were being bought out by large entities with no connection to the community. And what was happening was these large businesses and the small businesses were the background of what was the development for heritage, arts, the cultural matters, parks, anything innovative within the community came from these families of small businesses that became larger businesses that came from the locally owned large businesses. And we saw this happening in Oshkosh. I mean, we can just name off the business off our hands that were bought out or went public, and you were losing the family connection to the community. And what were we going to do to recapture the intellectual space that would take the community further. The downtowns and these communities in the upper Midwest were going by the wayside. And they called us the Rust Belt. You don't hear that term anymore. And it's kind of interesting because I still have contacts in Florida. Even people that are residing there, look at the upper Midwest as, yeah, we have our issues, but still you can't beat the communities like Oshkosh, La Crosse, Eau Claire, Wausau, even Milwaukee and the suburbs of Milwaukee. And so when I was president of the chamber in 1988, the chamber board said, "Well, Ed, welcome aboard as president. We have a capital campaign." And I think that people understand, when the president, your new president comes in, you got a capital campaign. Oh, wow, good. I get to go out and knock on doors and raise money. And so I said, okay, as long as we're doing that, I would like to do a leadership program. And I knew there were some leadership programs that existed in Wisconsin. There were Leadership Green Bay had existed, and there was even a leadership program in Manitowoc. And I had no knowledge of these programs. My only knowledge was the one in Fort Lauderdale called Leadership Broward for Broward County. And we said, okay, what is that program? Well, the program is to get a hold of the talent that's coming into the community for these new businesses that are, the buyouts, or the new people being transferred in. Let's get a hold of those people. People remember John Del Antonio? John Del Antonio was really big with regard to developing Main Street here. John was in the Leadership Oshkosh program. Dale Draban. Dale Draban was CFO for Mercy Hospital. He came up here from Chicago. I would have given Dale 5 years. Well, he's living here to this day. And matter of fact, I think that's the call that came through here right now. But anyway, it was a project where it was a fun project, but it was a pilot project. And it was a pilot project in that we thought, okay, maybe 5 years we'll tap out the talent. We'll go to the transferees that are coming into this town because they have no connection to the community. Let's get them involved in the community. These are smart people. Let's use their intelligence and let's leverage what we can for the development of the community. And then we looked at the people that were, I'd say, mid-career, and they were far enough along in their career where they could take a little bit of time and get involved in the community and on the local boards and things, and tap that resource because, like all of us, we kind of live in a cocoon. We drive along, even in the summer. Today, who had their windows down? Their windows are up, and I'm not talking about just the smoke, but even the hot, humid weather. We have our windows up, air conditioning on, and in the wintertime, the windows are up, the heaters are on, and we just cruise by. We listen. What we used to push the button for the station. Now you say channel 66 XM. Boom, it comes up. You're in your own cocoon, and you're not tapped into the community. Well, how about if we got those people interested in getting involved in the community? And then the other component was the retirees that came into the program that we were looking for. And I remember Jack Mitchell. Jack Mitchell was with Georgia Pacific, and he was retiring. He was one of the first retirees in the program. I remember Jack Nelson from C.R. Meyer, Phyllis Leach. It came through the program. Came through the program as a retiree. And I don't mean to, Inky Youngworth came through the program as a retiree. And so what we wanted to do was capture that. And we thought 5 years. looking through materials in this 18-wheeler I have parked out in front of all the materials on Leadership Oshkosh. Just kidding. But anyway,
He's not kidding.
but anyway,
Probably good to close.
but
We've got the box over here.
yeah, we do have the box over there.
We'll get some B-roll footage.
Yeah. But anyway, it was, we were able to, the program took on it just had a momentum of its own, really. But it was for the people that are involved, that stayed involved in the program and are involved in this program today, and the new people that carry forward. Now Jim's got the figures on it, because as I retired, I went to the balcony, and sometimes you need to just let things take care of themselves and stay out of the way, and so that's what I've done the last 12 years.
I really want to talk more about the origins and dig into Leadership Oshkosh a little bit, but I also want to kind of hear your story too, Jim, and just kind of where you came from, how you got here, and your involvement with some of the origins as well.
Sure.
Leadership Oshkosh.
Originally from Menominee Falls, active family, 5 brothers, family involved in the community, school board issues, and so grew up with that, where parents run boards and things. That was just something you did. Something from that area, you went to college. So all 6 of us went to college. All 6 have at least master's degree. That was just built into the DNA as to what you did coming out of there. And then went to La Crosse. That was just a coincidence that Ed had been there too, quite a few years ahead of me. But anyway, I'd been to La Crosse as well. Went there for a bachelor's degree. Then went to Madison for a law degree. And then I had an offer to work for a law firm out of Milwaukee that would either be in Eau Claire, and having been up in La Crosse, I like that area, Madison, and having lived there for a few years, that was interesting, or Milwaukee, and being from that area, that was interesting. So I get this call one day from Ed Williams, who says, I know you got an offer in these 3 other cities in the state, but I've got an opening here in Oshkosh. Well, to be honest, from La Crosse, Madison, and Milwaukee, I had to get out a map. I'll admit I had to get out a map. Because the only time I'd been here was St. Patty's Day. That didn't really count, But anyway, I came up and Ed said, I got another thing I got to tell you, aside from, coming to Oshkosh, is the only time I can talk to you is on this Saturday, and I promised the kids to go ice skating. So do you mind doing your interview on ice skates? Well, just, it was nice to have offers, but it was still hard to get a job. So heck yeah, we're going to do an interview on ice skates, and the rest is sort of history. X years later, almost 40 years later, in liking the Fox Valley, coming to the Fox Valley, can't imagine wanting to go back and do rush hour traffic anymore, or any of that. And the dynamics of this community and the business community, the people, can't imagine doing something different. It's been just great. I'm really fortunate.
And all started on ice skates.
It started on ice skates, and I haven't been on them since.
Maybe if Rob can get on that ice rink somewhere around here, we'll have to talk about that coming up. Maybe on another show. But well, that's really awesome. And I Ed, when you were talking, you had talked about Leadership Oshkosh and solving a problem that I think I see it exist around, and I'm just kind of curious of how you've seen this evolve. Is you're right, there's like large companies that seem to acquire mid to additional large companies, but there's this, and it's become super attractive with paid time off, with flexible work schedules and all these things to work for large companies, but we forget that small business entrepreneurship is really the backbone of the American economic system. Talk to me how you approached that problem with Leadership Oshkosh and what you've seen the difference it's made.
Well, I think, first of all, what we did is when we started the program, even with the, we went to the leadership of the local companies and even the new leadership. Well, for instance, we had John Carroll was, at that time, remember, it was called Oshkosh Truck. It wasn't called Oshkosh Corporation. It was called Oshkosh Truck. Was the Mosling family, and John Carroll was the CEO, and he preceded me as chairman of the chamber, and I had talked to John, and I said, I told him about this program, and he says, well, that'll work for us. That, but, understand Oshkosh is a local corporation, but understand also the number of people they brought in from other entities. I know that we've had, I don't recall the names, but we've had other chairpersons of the chamber that were transferees in from Oshkosh Corporation that were out of Detroit and elsewhere that have come in. Oshkosh Bagash. We had people. John Dell'Antonio was with Oshkosh Bagash, and I think John was chair of the chamber at one time, and then also he was in the leadership program.
It's on a city council.
It was on the city council. But anyway, we would meet with these entities and tell them the advantage of having the connections in the community, and how see, it's a 9-month program, and you need to have that individual off for 9 months. In the first month of the program, it's 2 days off, and you go out of the city. And the reason for that is to get your head away from your work so that you can concentrate on what you're going to get in moving forward for the next 9 months, because it's now going to set you ahead. You may well be with this corporation for the rest of your working career, and you don't know this at the time. So it's important for the company, the business, to have that linkage to the community, because that's where their workforce is from. And their kids go to school here. And, they need to know the who, what, when, where, how, and why of the community and be involved in that. And people got that. The business entities got it. And so it was not a big push to get them to have these people have time off.
Yeah. It's really an interesting approach to try to intertwine people to put roots down here. And that's kind of the foundation of economic development in a lot of ways.
Well, it's interesting because, economic development, you're putting money into infrastructure. We always looked at Leadership Oshkosh as an investment in the minds of the people who live in the community, so that they had the interconnections, with regard to how you go about solving them, or how does the community go about solving problems. So what are the problems? I look back. It's interesting. I look back to today. We're discussing the issue of child care and what's going on in the state legislature and what's going on throughout the country. Well, this was something that was, there was a task force of the chamber that tackled this back in the early 80s. It's interesting how things circle around. And so now it's a different era, different, modes of communication, and you got to have the people on board and, decide where are we going to tackle these projects. Because it's not just, for instance, taking issue with the child care thing. It's not just a child care thing. It's how can I get my work done at work when I'm thinking about, taking care of my kids. I know I could speak well of this because I'm a grandpa. And now I have the youngest grandchild. I was always working. I never had time. It's like I can't take care of these kids. I was fortunate enough my wife was able to be with the kids all the time. But this guy had me up day and night working, all the time. The towers we put in are unrelenting. I'm amazed I was able to retire alive, Jim. Anyway,
Jim,
our humor.
Jim, I want to talk a little bit. I know as an active steering committee member of the chamber, looking back, I think this is a good question for both you two, is looking back at the history of things that were done for economic development, and then where we are today, as far as a community that we can do, use different economic tools. Where are we at in that cycle, I guess, and what do you think are the existing problems, and where should we focus, in your opinion? Question for both.
Interesting, a couple of developments over all of the years and looking at it. Before moving here, I asked that they send me the local paper, and actually Ed suggested, he says, get the local paper and read that for months before you move here. So I did. And an interesting perspective of that is, and again, I'm an outsider. I don't know people in town. I don't know the background of the history, but there was this tension within the articles between the city, the business community, and the newspaper and the media. And it never made sense. Why are they all beating each other up all the time from an outsider's point of view? Things like the leadership program, things like the initiatives from the university and certainly from the chamber worked really hard on that over the years to say, we can beat each other up, or we can kind of pool the talent that we all have and the ideas that the different people have, either from being in town or bringing ideas in from out of town like Ed did, and capitalize on that. And we can take a city that's sort of just average and doing okay, and maybe phasing down from being the central part of the state where the conventions came to, a lot of the stuff came to get that back on track. So that was an outsider's view, watching that kind of development to bring people together to say, let's make this stronger, work together, and then encourage others to come. We also had to boost the bigger companies as far as that and support that. And the Chamber's always had the initiatives of how do we attract? How do we get people to come here, as you mentioned? How do we get people that come to the university and then stay here? Why is it a good place? And then you see an award a couple of weeks ago, best place to live. That didn't just happen. That is hundreds of people pulling together to say, back to some of these discussions Ed was talking about, to say, we don't want to be average. We got to do better than this, and let's pool. Another thing from my point of view is coming into the community. And it's really neat in the leadership program. We'll have those in the class that have always lived in Oshkosh and bring that perspective to the class, which is really helpful and important. And then you have other of us that you didn't know anything about it, but came into it and then added that, and you get those discussions and that synergy going. But a lot of things people would say is, how do I get involved? There's the typical names of people that seem to be on all the boards and all the different things. How do we break through that to open the doors for people to do that? Leadership adds 30 to 40 people a year from a wide variety of businesses that have instant contacts with each other, instant contacts to 1,200 alumni, into who to talk to, how to get involved. And then they all have experience on different boards as adjunct people during the time that they're on, to get introduced to giving back to the community, to being on a board. We have probably 60 different boards that offer to say, we'd love to have one of your people on the board. We have a high percentage of people then that stay on those boards, all with an interest of making that community stronger. The community stronger, that's better for businesses. It attracts the businesses, and then they grow from there. It all fits together pretty neat when you see all of that come together over the years.
I think one of the things that the program also generates is that, Jim, you hit on it, and that is the networking. Because if you're a new business entrepreneur or acquired a business, just came into town, how are you going to get connect to the community? How are you going to connect with the people that make the decisions in this community? And it was kind of neat. Last night I was going through some of the materials that I ran. There was an interview of Carla Altapeter. People remember Carla Altapeter? She was hired to become the president of the Wisconsin Axle Company, which is a credit union, which is now Verve. And she came here from California to Oshkosh, Wis. And her comment was, that I read last night, it was an interview of her, and she said, right away I came from California. She says, I didn't know anybody. But within 2 weeks, I was in the Leadership Oshkosh program, and she said, I learned so much about the community and so many people, and it just catapulted me into the business community of the area. And she said that more than anything did it for me. And she was on several boards, and she was just a dynamo in the community.
Yeah, it sounds like the program in general is just this catalyst program for networking. So you can, if you get executives, you get kind of mid-career folks that are needing to get dialed into the network, into the community, they can get fast-tracked into that kind of environment so that they can make decisions quicker. They know who to go to, and it's the who, not how kind of aspect of running a community.
Exactly. And what's interesting about that is the connections last for as long as you're here and beyond, because it's interesting the synergy that develops, because you know who the go-to people are on certain issues, and you can find out, okay, where are the problems? Let's sit down, let's have coffee, let's have a beer, let's talk about it. Maybe you can help me out with this issue, and bingo, the people that know about the issues and navigating that issues are plugged right into you.
You mentioned a really important part of the project that sets that up, the program, and that's the 2-day overnight retreat to start. And early on, you guys decided to say, this has got to be out of town. This has got to be turn the phones off. This has got to be, you got to focus on that. And it's all built toward that class coming together and bonding to get to know each other, and all the exercises and things that go on during those 2 days build the rest of the year. And it's been successful every year to start that. And then there's a debate every year by the time we get to the graduation 9 months later, is what was the best class ever? And every group at the graduation is pretty proud to suggest that they are the best class because of the relationships that were built, the bonds that were built. Again, you mentioned, John Delantonio and Inky Youngworth were in my class, 1991. I could pick up the phone today and call John and have talked to him every once in a while. It's that neat, that many years later, to be able to make calls and talk to people. Those are the ones in the class that's separate from all the alum to say, leadership, this is who you call. It's neat.
I want to have a chance as well to ask you, you guys both have a rich history in dealing with business, different business owners from a legal perspective. Just kind of curious if you could share any highlights or any interesting stories throughout your kind of legal career, is what you found to be beneficial for entrepreneurs, what you found some interesting cases that you worked on that are public and you're able to share details about. I'd just like to kind of farm your brains for a moment.
Well, Ed had mentioned Oshkosh Truck and Oshkosh Corporation. The development's been interesting to watch that over the years. Stock price was pretty low for a little while in some of the time periods, and it was questionable as the family changed and what was going to happen to Oshkosh Corporation or Oshkosh Truck at the time. We were both involved in representing Oshkosh Corporation for a number of years. One of the things involved in was to do some of the collective bargaining for them with the UAW. So I was at the table, was their spokesperson to bargain a contract with them. And it was at a time period they were getting some government contracts, but it was a struggle. And as you know, within the community, you can have big corporations, and then you have so many other businesses that are not necessarily reliant, but tied to that. So it isn't Oshkosh Corporation, it's 50, 60 other companies that generate jobs and business because Oshkosh Corporation. So if Oshkosh Corporation or AMCO or any of the big folks do well, that's good for lots of other folks too. But anyway, in Oshkosh bargaining, we had to get a change in the healthcare participation. How much would the employees pay? And the UAW was not budget. And the porta potties were going out for the strike, and all the strike lines were getting set up, and all the security aspects of that. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of planning, a lot of things that go on with that. At the end of the day, though, at about the 11th hour or so, we did get the movement that we needed on the health insurance. And I remember going up along with our bargaining team to Bob Bond's office at the time and told him we got this number. And if you knew Bob, he was a class act, the classic CEO, stayed calm, collected. He said, "You're kidding. You got it?" And he was all excited, and he's almost jumping up and down. And I get this big bear hug from Bob, which was really unusual, okay? What I didn't know, and it was a good thing I didn't know, was that number had to figure into the biggest government contract and pulling a couple of trucks out of Texas. And that number and how that all came together with that bargain and their bid pulled that work, and the rest is history in terms of the contracts that they went. I had some stock in Oshkosh Corporation at the time. It was probably worth about $8 to $10 a share. Had I known that, I probably would have had a sell with Martha Stewart. So I really appreciate that they never told me that was the rest of the story. But that's one of them. And then you see those kind of things happen. And again, I was involved. I'm one of 50. I don't know how many people working on that. Okay, so I'm not taking credit. I just say something you say that we were involved in, that we saw, and then watch that expand and develop over time. It's just incredible. And then the number of other companies that we represented over the years that are somehow connected to Oshkosh Corporation, whether it be the paint, whether it be the glass, whether it be whatever for the vehicles, is just unbelievable.
What do you think the stakes would have been if the results of that case went the other way?
I don't even want to, I can't, I don't know. Like I say, they were building, they were doing okay. But we all know that one clearly kickstarted things to really ramp it up in terms of
a defense contractor in many ways.
They were getting contracts, but that was huge. That was really big, and the rest was just went from there.
Well, you know, I won't talk about a specific case, but I have to say we did a lot of work in representing cities, counties, school districts in collective bargaining negotiations and labor and employment matters and things like that. And you have, that's a big constituency in a community. And, to hold that together, but yet, our kids go to the schools here or whatever, whatever community you're in, but you got to be able to manage from a business perspective. But also, you understand that your kids are in school. You got to have the expenditures necessary to have good training, good education. But you got to do that based upon what are the comparables also. So there's a delicate balance. But that was we spent a lot of time doing that, and that is important in maintaining a community, maintaining a stable community, so that people that come in here to work at a business or to own a business want to educate their kids here, and they don't just live in another community and commute into work. They live in this community,
and that's an important point that you're making with it. And it's another one we were emphasizing as we were working through this program and working through other things. And this, like I say, this perspective of the media, this where was the city, where was the business community, and fitting those together. And the reality was, the perspective a lot of us took was, we're all the chamber. The city's part of the chamber. The university is part of the chamber. It isn't the business community versus anybody else. The business community, sure, there's a profit motive, but it also creates lots of jobs, and that helps everybody. Ed's right. I mean, the view was, we're all in this together. We want the strongest university we can have. We want the strongest public schools, not the most expensive. There's a difference on that. We want it cost-effective and fair and the money being spent right. But the chamber has always supported education and those institutions to say, if our medical services, we want them to be strong. We're not afraid of having some competition in regards to that, because that competition will make it stronger. But all of that fit together. So why does a business community, those taxes for the schools? Well, Ed's right, that mattered, be cost effective, but be strong, and they get the support.
How do you think we're doing with that today, if you were to look at from kind of your view?
Well, I think we're cost effective. I think our university is strong. I think it does well, and I think it's a good reputation. I think our secondary schools have work to do on their facilities, and they have plans to do that, and they're They're doing better with that. And maybe historically we might have been a little too conservative on our facilities aspects of things. But I think in terms of their curriculums, in terms of their educational pieces, it's pretty good. It's very competitive in the Fox Valley, and we work with most of the schools through the Fox Valley, so pretty comfortable in saying that. I think we're in good shape, and I think we have good people working hard to say we're not taking average either, and we're not happy with where we are. We're going to keep pushing it. And there'll always be that balance between being great and being cost effective, and that's always the important debate, to keep that in line, keep that right. That's hard.
Have either of you ever looked into if there was attrition, or like in cases where we're trying to retain talent in the community at large, if there was areas of attrition, what those reasons were, or what the causes were, or themes that you've ever noticed over the years, out of curiosity?
Well, I think that, when people, you can look at South Florida. I'll look at that because you have a lot of in-migration right now. But when I first came out of law school and went to Fort Lauderdale, Broward County was 600,000 people. When I left Broward County, it was 1.2 million people. And that was in 10 years. And that was in the 70s and early 80s. And but what you saw then an out-migration away from the gridlock of Miami-Dade County and Broward County north. It's kind of like, I called it backfilling. It'd be like same thing in Milwaukee or same thing in Madison, where they're moving, not necessarily leaving the state, but moving to other communities. And guess what? They're looking at communities the size of Oshkosh. They're looking at the smaller communities. Why? Because they can have more say. They feel like they can have input. It's not, like I said, living in the cocoon, driving to and from work and just listening to XM radio. You can have real input.
But you also have all the bases covered in terms of healthcare, in terms of schools, going back to that, in terms of infrastructure, as you mentioned that. And you have a pretty good location. Does it get cold? Sure. But when we talk about attrition, I'll start with saying there isn't a business we represent that isn't looking for people, that isn't having trouble hiring. But that's not unique to Oshkosh or Wisconsin or the country as far as that goes. That's a problem we had a study on 30 years ago to say, what are we going to do when we get to 2020 and we don't have enough people to fill jobs because of retirement? That's not new. And people have been working on that for a long time. But you got to have those things that are attractive to make because we have a beautiful place. Gosh, remember all the work economic and just the river property. And just to say within Oshkosh, what is with this beautiful lake and river, and we're not developing it. We've got to go back a few years. Totally different as we drive today. But 30 years ago, the resources we have here. So that's all in play. And so it helps with attrition as far as that goes. Are we seeing that? Sure. Do we see people that move here to say we like it and we'd like to say, sure. Sold a house a couple years ago. Not everybody, but most of the people that looked at it were from urban areas that had some connection with the Midwest that wanted to get out of high crime areas to say, I want to go where it's safe. I want to go where it's clean. I want to go where I got good health care. I want to go where I can get on a plane and go wherever I want in the world. And we have that quiet secret that we kind of promote, but we don't want to say too much about because it's kind of nice right now.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, just you look at the Appleton Airport, how it's grown. And remember the years ago, the battle between Winnebago County and Outagamie County on the two airports, and where we are now. It's kind of interesting how, my grandson was going out to visit the other day, his other grandpa in Oregon, and he could get on a flight in Appleton direct to Portland. Who would have thunk that? You can get on a plane, and I remember, having to go back and forth to Florida. And I'd go get on a plane, and 6:30 in the morning, you get on a little prop, and it was a Midwest Express. Remember Midwest Express prop, Milwaukee, and then you walk down from Concourse D down to the other concourse and get on a jet in the Midwest. Remember, all first class to Fort Lauderdale, but or Orlando or Fort Lauderdale, and but today you just take that stuff for granted, and you can go anywhere out of Green Bay or out here. You don't have to go to Milwaukee. It's interesting, and you know what? If you have to go to Milwaukee, big deal. It's.
Well, I think you make a good point that one of the attractive features of this community is the proximity to Madison, Milwaukee, Green Bay, all within an hour and a half at best. And then also the proximity to the Appleton Airport. Talking about just transportation opportunities and things like that as a community at large, what do you think would be some really good opportunities to jump on, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an advocate for public transportation? What are some things that you think would be a good idea?
It's really interesting you say that, because I think that we're very fortunate to have the I-41 to get that project through. I mean, that's amazing, because I think in terms of that. But you're right. Now going forward, what are we going to do? For here from aviation, our take has been, let's grow the aircraft parts manufacturing business and all the related aircraft, aviation delivery services, that sort of thing here, as opposed to looking at the transportation. But, and the transport, other than that, the link would be, I think would be 26 to me would be the most serious thing to look at, because, you have to, most people go to Fond du Lac and then to get to Madison, they do that V. They don't do the cut through to Rosendale. But
have you ever had thoughts of getting to downtown, where downtown seems to be sometimes omitted from a lot of development because of the difficulty? I don't know. Any thought?
Yeah,
that's certainly been a discussion over the years, is do you change some of those roads to make it an in-road, but then so is the whole concept of a downtown versus not. And I don't know the answer to that. I mean, people have different views about that. Is that critical? Isn't it critical? I think the other pieces are more critical. I think of the other transportation. Well, what's your thoughts on that?
It's interesting. I just think in our own office, our office manager drove from Fond du Lac every day. And, I look at the commute I had in Fort Lauderdale. It was 45 minutes in, we're lucky if it was 45 minutes back out in the afternoon. And, I didn't live that far. I mean, that was, so we are the community, the problems that we have, the issues, I wouldn't even call it a problem, the issues that we have with near city transportation, I don't think are that great. But that's my own opinion. But I lived out in the town of Algoma for many years and would commute in.
The wild 15-minute commute.
Yeah, it's like, let's get a grip here.
Yeah.
Plus, you got to stop by a train.
It's brutal here.
With people that are coming in from, working from larger communities, they're thinking this is like, we got it made.
Yeah. I don't think it's a matter of the right roads to get downtown. I think it's, what do you have downtown? What are you doing downtown? What did you do in Neenah? What did you do in Manitowoc? What did you do in Sheboygan? What are you doing that makes it attractive? People will get there if they like what there is to do there. If there's restaurants, if there's apartments, we have the resources on the river and the other stuff. And it's happening. It's never quick enough, but it's happening in terms of that. Nobody's going to be able to compete with what we could put together and are putting together downtown, in my humble opinion. But getting there, people will find a way to get there if they like what they're going to.
I was just visiting family members in Minneapolis, And I have a granddaughter that lives in downtown, smack downtown Minneapolis. And we're going to pick her up, going to go to her apartment and pick her up. Well, we couldn't find parking, and And guess what? It's 4:45 p.m. and we're going to go to dinner. So, it was kind of, we had to walk 4 blocks to get to her high rise and then go out to dinner. And we had reservations. And guess what? The line went to Algoma with reservations on a Wednesday afternoon. So, I mean, Oshkosh, I think we got it made.
No, that's great. I do want to open it up for a moment for questions, because I know we have some folks in the audience that have been part of Leadership Oshkosh or are currently a part of Leadership Oshkosh, as well as I might want to ask you all and pick your brains on some different parts of your career.
Well, a few clarifications on the transportation. I worked on that committee to get the I-41. Oshkosh Chamber took the lead with that over 1984 is when we started that with John Carroll, myself, and we actually did a survey of the whole 41 corridor, all the way from Milwaukee, all the way to Green Bay. We had all the chambers along that corridor were all involved, but we took the lead and did the first, you'd send out pamphlets and have them fill them out. What's important? Where is all the capital coming from? And one of the first things we had to do was get the overpasses raised. Most of them were not legal for interstate. Interstate's totally different controlled than U.S. highway. So you had a lot of different things going on there. It took 20 years, over 20 years, to get that done. But the Oshkosh Chamber was instrumental in starting that whole situation. Going back to the airport, I blame the loss of the airport on about 3 individuals that I don't really want to name from back in that era, but that was a battle. And that went back to the deregulation of the airlines in 1978. So that's how far back, because Oshkosh was the designated airport.
It was North Central. I used to fly.
The ruptured duck.
Yeah, I used to fly out of Green Bay and make a stop here and then go to Milwaukee. And who started that airline, by the way? It was the Clintonville and Oshkosh Truck and these entities that need to get out. They needed their employees to get out to Washington D.C. or wherever they're.
That was the old 4-wheel drives.
Yeah,
four-wheel drive.
Right.
4-wheel drives.
Yep.
Yeah. You got a good memory, Ed. I got to give you credit. But my other comment, it's not really a question, but I just want to thank you guys for all you've done. I've known both of you for over 30 years, and you were very instrumental in making things happen here. And your recollection of the Rust Belt. We had some pretty tough times here in the 80s and 90s, so it's great what has transpired over the years, and I think we're in the right direction. But thank both of you again.
You're welcome, but and you talk about that, and if I go back to the leadership program and I talk about the couple hundred of people that work on that program over the 9 months, all the people that volunteer to come in to speak, all the people that come in to do the programming during the day, the different directors like Trina Volt this year working on that, and the hours that get spent putting it together. It is so many neat people that come together. We always talk about it. Everybody does just a little bit of something. Everybody just does a little something. You take 1,200 people plus, a lot gets done. And
this was the fun stuff. You got, people got to understand when you get involved in the community, you meet some really interesting people. There's an old saying, what does it say? Iron makes iron stronger.
Iron sharpens iron.
That's what it is. Yeah. Iron sharpens iron. And that's what it is. Because to keep up with some of these people, they're pretty smart. I mean, you got to really be on your toes. You got to really be on your game. And it's fun.
What are, maybe it's a good question for Trina too, but what are the kind of qualifications right now that you're looking for folks in Leadership Oshkosh?
Well, I'll let Trini answer if she'd like to, but let me start with, we always like to have a class with a very diverse background. We like people from town. We like people from out of town. We like different ages. We like different backgrounds in terms of whatever diversity we can add to that is all, and that's always, but that's long before those terms were popular, was really important to this program to have that put together that way. We wanted big businesses, we want small businesses, we want public sector, we want nonprofits. We find and that's a different type of diversity, but it's all really important as to what we're looking for in recruiting. We have some companies that have been involved since day one in terms of supporting and bringing people to it. But every year we also have a couple other companies that say, hey, we think we've heard about this, we may want to join that too. And that's always good because we want to add that. The tough thing, in 34 years?
34 years going on. This will be the 35th class next May.
And you take a community this size and you still have a waiting list for people, that's telling us that something's going right, but it's also telling us there are other groups out there that are interested in joining, and we see that every year. So that's an overview of what we look for. It's always recruiting. It's recruiting all the time. But the program kind of recruits itself too, and because of what's happened.
And what's interesting is that all views. I mean, people have all views, and they come to this. And I'll tell you what, that's how you learn. And so, because you got to have different ideas to, you might not think this. You might not have thought of this idea, and somebody else came up with it, but it may well take this community forward in, many years.
Well, it's like the iron sharpens iron part. If you can test out good ideas through debate, especially well-educated, leaders like that.
It used to be, years and years ago, how people would come into the community and they just felt isolated. Now, I'm not saying Oshkosh, I'm saying everywhere. It's an inside crowd that runs the business, and makes the decisions. How wrong is that?
Well, you hear that, and having solutions like this hey, have you heard about Leadership Oshkosh? That's the answer. That's the anecdote. Because you do hear that with folks that come into town, and I think it's important to do things like this to raise that awareness.
About an 86% response that we had from a survey of 86% of the participants said they got on some board or active in some other aspect of the community because of their participation. That's a really high return. That's a really good return. Like I say, you had that many people doing that many things and that many boards or projects. We do awards every year it's just incredible. The things that projects people come up with that got together and talked about it within the program, then went out and did something in the community, whether it's developing a park. There's just so many, I shouldn't even start because there's so many neat things that people did that we had to do awards for people because it was so insightful and so dynamic of things that wouldn't have had that opportunity maybe had they not met with other people and pull things together to do that. Pretty incredible.
Yeah. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Trina, to that, or you can pass the mic?
I think I went through the program in 2014, and I never would have imagined I would be leading this. And when I got the call, I was thrilled. And there's two things. One, it's really fun to see people who relocate to the area, who get in the program, and they immediately start meeting people. And now we have a few from this year's class who will become speakers next year. But the thing that I look for is people who want to lead where they live and love where they live. And if there's something they don't love about Oshkosh, let's dig in there and fix it.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. Colin, you had a question, or Rob first? Whatever.
This will be a quick one and kind of a tough one for you guys. You may have pitchforks at your door, but who do you think is the best class ever?
91.
91. There you go.
Did it take too long?
And you know what? That's the second class, and he's never heard that term before.
Yeah, I was in the second class, 1991, and forevermore we're called a second class.
Hey, yeah, thanks for everything you've done, over the years, growing this program and multiple directors and kind of leading things and keeping them on straight and narrow. And I mean, programs change certainly over the years as well, and it's doing as well now as it's ever done. But if you look back, or about young aspiring leaders, is there one or two things, whether they're engaged in Leadership Oshkosh or not, is there any, advice that you'd give them to get involved and to help their community and to, to advance their careers, or, whether it's just getting involved, being a volunteer? What would that be? I mean,
Well, the first thing you need to do is tend to your knitting. And what I mean by that is learn your trade, focus in on what you're here for, and that's your work and your family. Okay, once you get to that point, now you can get involved, in the community matters, because you've got the solid footing that you have. And so I'd say invest in your family, invest in your work, and then invest in your community. But I think once you get to that point, I think your doors will be opened immensely to not just the business context, network context, but just the whole horizon of what's there, the giving to the community, and the ideas. What I like is testing out your ideas and why they won't work or why they won't. The arguments going back and forth. That's what I enjoy, and then putting together, building a model, and let's see if we can fly this thing and see if it works. Leadership Oshkosh worked, but guess what? It may not have worked, but it did. But it was because of everybody involved in the program. And that's what I think is exhilarating, is taking new ideas and seeing if they work.
I look at it in terms of, and we talked to the groups at the orientation to say, we're not looking for people to come in and conquer the world. We're not looking for people to come in and solve world peace and hunger. We're looking for people to come in and just do a little bit. And again, back to that. The other thing we say is that there is no one kind of leader. There is no one style that it has to be. We need kind of all styles. We need the introvert. We need the extrovert. We need the people that can at least talk to each other and respect each other. Something we miss a lot of as we see other things going on around us, but we don't allow that in the leadership program. That gets addressed if people can't respect each other. But I think people are afraid sometimes to say, God, I could never do that. Some of these people are just incredible, the energy and the stuff they have. And going, oh, no, you got that wrong. As a sports guy, Rob, you know this. We did that together, coaching and refereeing and stuff. And if somebody told me someday I'm going to be the chair of the Grand Opera House, when the roof goes out, you're going to raise a couple $1 million. I was the farthest thing from the guy, being the chair of the Grand. But I couldn't have met greater people. I couldn't have learned more things about things that I would have never known but for those kind of opportunities. And I got a little push. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. Takes all kind of. That's what I kind of encourage the different groups to do. Try something you've never tried. Reach out for something you never thought you would do. If you're going to be on an adjunct board, don't pick something you like or something you know. Pick the farthest thing from your mind, and you might be incredibly surprised at what you learn and who you meet and what you learn. And you know what? That's come back from a lot of people to say, I'm glad I did that. I'm really glad I tried that. Not just the program, but I tried stuff that I never thought. And I never thought I'd be on this committee. And we never thought we'd raise $25,000 at some raffle as we put some program together. It's pretty exciting. The energy and the synergy is unbelievable. It's really fun.
One other question that you haven't addressed today, and I'm kind of curious how you're going to answer this, because
I don't have an answer.
Oh, Ed, you've answered everything I ever asked you in the last 35 years. Come on. When I grew up, I always said I want to be like you. My question is on volunteerism. My generation, everybody volunteered. That was just kind of expected of you, whether it be in community organizations, whatever. In today's world, I get some feedback from younger people that say, well, why should I do that? What's in it for me? And back in our generation, we never thought that way. We said we'd be happy to volunteer because we want to be part of it. And the younger generation, I get the impression, and they're not all like that, but what's in it for me? What do I get out of this? I had never looked to get anything back for volunteering. Never did that. Never crossed our minds.
I have an answer to that. One answer, but I'd answer the question with a question. How far do you want to go with your career? How do you want to just go up? You want to plateau? You want to branch out? You want to create opportunities for yourself? Because there are two parts of this. It's not just the volunteerism. You're getting plugged into a network connection, whether you know it or not, and that's gonna pay dividends for you for years to come. Now, it might not be exactly monetary dividends, but it could be, like, well, do you know so-and-so? Yeah, I've been on a board with him, and what kind of guy, what kind of lady is he or she? Oh, they're great, really good thinkers, da-da-da-da-da. Well, okay, I think I might hire them to their company to do thus and such. This person might be just a mid-level manager or something, but it's going to help them in the community with regard to how that individual is perceived within the community. Is that person perceived as somebody that's a builder, or is that going to be somebody who's perceived as a place setter? And people that just sit at the place setting may discover in the long run that they have less food sitting on their plate than the person that goes beyond being a place setter.
Yeah, I see it that the things that other or older generations did as service is just changed. So I don't think that the younger generation doesn't volunteer. I just think they do other things, and they aren't as amenable to the Rotary clubs and I'm not knocking the Rotary clubs. I'm just giving some of the older institutional volunteer type stuff that maybe you and I might have done or Ed might have done. Those have changed, and they've morphed into other kind of organizations. And what's exciting through the leadership program is when we see the younger folks get involved and their eyes are opened as to all the different pieces of a community, the healthcare, the education, all the different pieces that got to come together. And then they see things that may be interesting to them that they could volunteer. It's just a different kind of institution or format they're volunteering in. I got to tell you, you see it too. I know you do. But the energy from some of the younger folks coming through this stuff and the ideas and the projects, I'm blown away. I can't come close to doing that kind of energy or those kind of projects or kind of talent that they brought. They just got to have the avenues to do it. They're just different.
The reason I asked is I'm still connected with a lot of business people, and they'll say to you, well, I asked so-and-so if they would do it, and the first thing that came out of their mouth, well, are you going to pay me for that time?
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it, and I'm saying it through the leadership program. It's just, what are we offering? And it's an advantage of the leadership program to open eyes and doors to say there's a lot more out there than the typical thing the company would say, would you go do this committee? No, that's not interesting to me. I would rather collect roadkill and make hats before I do that. Okay? No. But but open the door to other ideas and other opportunities. You unleash that energy and that enthusiasm, and we see it all the time, in the leadership program. Incredible.
Enough out of you.
I bought one of your hats. I'm not knocking it.
So what you're talking about is the silo. I call it the silo thinkers. Actually, I talked to other people about that, about, the concern of people they work in their own silo. And it's like, and that's the up to, mid-career, they're still in the silo. They can't reach out. I guess I'm an upper Midwest guy. If I was in South Florida, they say, what's a silo? but anyway, what I mean is just like the concrete around you going up, and you just build the barriers around yourself, and but I never thought that way. I was reach out. I was a people person, but and some people are people persons. But the thing of it is they can bring something to the table, And I hear you with regard to, it's got to be self-motivated, but it's also redirecting and saying, helping people say, well, there's some great opportunities out there, and you can have a ball. Working on some of this stuff. And you've done the same thing. Look at this guy's come from falling on his rear end skating with my family to where he is today. To me, I'm
Falling on his ass cheating.
just a retiree. Cut. True. You don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Right.
So many times, Rob, that's absolutely the scenario that people really want to help. They really just need an avenue to, and they need a little push, and it's a compliment to get asked. So absolutely, it matters.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you so much for your time today. I know we're coming up on time, but this was an absolutely wonderful interview. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thanks for sharing with us, and not only just Oshkosh, but other communities can listen to this and learn from some of the success that we've had over the last couple of years or decades, and be able to recreate that in maybe different communities all around the state or country. So thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.